She was worth $9 billion. Her product never worked. Theranos. In 2014, a 29-year-old woman appeared on the cover of a major business magazine, dressed in a black turtleneck, described as the next Steve Jobs. Her company was valued at $9 billion. She told investors, journalists, and the American public that her invention could run hundreds of medical tests from a single drop of blood pricked from a fingertip. There was only one problem. It never worked. Not once, not reliably, not at scale. And when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't just destroy a company. It put its founder in a federal prison for more than a decade. This is the story of Theranos. Unlike Blockbuster, which failed by refusing to change, Theranos failed by promising a change that was never real to begin with. At its peak, the company was valued higher than most airlines, staffed with former secretaries of state on its board, partnered with one of the largest pharmacy chains in the country, and run by a founder who raised over $700 million from investors who believed she was about to revolutionize medicine. None of it was built on a working product. This is not a story about a company that got outcompeted. It's a story about a company that was by design engineered to keep failing quietly for as long as possible, while collecting money from people who never got to see behind the curtain. The story begins in 2003, when a 19-year-old Stanford University sophomore named Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of school to found a company she called Theranos, a blend of the words therapy and diagnosis. Her pitch was simple and, on paper, revolutionary. Instead of drawing multiple vials of blood with a needle for lab testing, Theranos would use a tiny device to run hundreds of diagnostic tests from just a few drops of blood taken with a simple finger prick. If it worked, it would have been one of the most important medical breakthroughs in a generation. Cheaper, faster, less invasive testing that could be done in a pharmacy instead of a hospital lab. Investors believed her, not just ordinary investors. Some of the most powerful and well-connected people in American business and politics. Theranos' board eventually included two former U.S. Secretaries of State, a former Secretary of Defense, retired military generals, and prominent venture capitalists. By 2014, the company had raised more than $700 million in funding and was valued at $9 billion, making Holmes, on paper, the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. The partnerships followed. In 2013, Theranos announced a deal with Walgreens, one of the largest pharmacy chains in the United States, to place Theranos testing centers called wellness centers inside Walgreens stores across the country. The vision was a Theranos machine in every neighborhood pharmacy in America. But behind the confident press conferences and the black turtleneck modeled after Steve Jobs, the core technology at the center of all of it, the device Holmes called the Edison, was failing almost every test it was given. According to extensive reporting that followed and testimony later given under oath, the Edison device could reliably perform only a small fraction of the tests Theranos claimed it could run. Internally, according to former employees who later spoke publicly, the device produced inaccurate results and in many cases simply didn't work at all. Rather than delay the rollout, disclose the limitations, or slow down until the technology actually functioned, the company's leadership made a different choice. When Theranos ran patient tests inside Walgreens wellness centers, the majority of them were reportedly not run on the Edison device at all. They were, according to later investigations and court testimony. The finger prick blood draw was often just theater. In many cases, blood was drawn conventionally from a vein and quietly funneled into industry-standard equipment, then relabeled as if the results had come from Theranos' own revolutionary technology. Real patients with real medical conditions were receiving lab results based on unreliable science, sometimes because the tiny sample sizes required by finger prick testing were diluted to work with machines they were never designed for. According to subsequent reporting, some patients received test results that inaccurately suggested serious health conditions based on flawed data from a system raised internally. Employees who raised concerns were reportedly dismissed, sidelined, or in some cases threatened with legal action if they spoke publicly. The culture, according to numerous accounts from former staff, was built around secrecy. Departments were kept siloed from each other so that no single employee, outside of Holmes and her partner and Theranos president, Ramesh Sunny Balwani, could see the full picture of how badly the technology was failing. The wall finally came down in October of 2015, not because of a regulator, not because of a competitor, but because of one journalist who refused to accept the official story. Wall Street Journal reporter John Carreyrou published an investigation built on interviews with former Theranos employees who had grown alarmed by what they'd witnessed inside the company. The article detailed doubts about the accuracy of Theranos' tests and revealed that most of the company's testing wasn't being done on its own proprietary technology at all. It was the first public crack in a story the company had spent over a decade protecting. Theranos denied the allegations aggressively at first, but regulators started paying attention. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services conducted inspections of Theranos' lab and found deficiencies serious enough to threaten the company's ability to operate at all. In 2016, Theranos voided or corrected tens of thousands of blood test results that had been issued to patients over the preceding 2 years. A public acknowledgement that a significant portion of its real-world testing had been unreliable. Once the technology's failures became public, the collapse moved quickly, but the consequences unfolded over years. Walgreens terminated its partnership and later sued Theranos. Investors who had poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the company began filing lawsuits of their own. In 2018, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission charged Holmes and Balwani with what it called an elaborate years-long fraud, accusing them of raising money from investors through exaggerated and false claims about the company's technology, business, and financial performance. Holmes settled the SEC's civil charges without admitting or denying the allegations, paid a financial penalty, and was barred from serving as an officer or director of a public company for 10 years. The civil case, though, was only the beginning. Later that same year, federal prosecutors filed criminal wire fraud charges against both Holmes and Balwani, accusing them of defrauding investors and patients. Theranos formally dissolved in September of 2018. Its remaining assets sold off. Its once $9 billion valuation reduced to nothing. The criminal trial that followed became one of the most closely watched corporate fraud cases in American history. In January of 2022, a jury found Holmes guilty on 4 counts of criminal fraud related to defrauding investors, though she was acquitted on separate charges related to defrauding patients directly. In November of 2022, she was sentenced to over 11 years in federal prison. Balwani, tried separately, was convicted on all counts against him and received a longer sentence. Holmes began serving her sentence in May of 2023. Her appeals to overturn the conviction were rejected by a federal appeals court, and as of the most recent public reporting, her sentence has been reduced somewhat for good behavior and participation in prison programs, with a projected release still years away. Attempts to seek a presidential commutation of her remaining sentence have, as of this recording, not been granted. But the most important number in this entire story isn't the $9 billion Theranos was once worth, or the 11 years Holmes was sentenced to. It's the number of real patients who received medical test results built on a technology that, according to the evidence presented at trial, the company's own leadership knew was not reliable. Blockbuster failed because it refused to change fast enough. Theranos failed for the opposite reason. It promised a transformation it had never actually built, and then spent over a decade trying to make the promise catch up to the reality, using real patients as the test subjects for a technology that wasn't ready. The uncomfortable lesson isn't just don't commit fraud. It's something more specific to how these situations are allowed to continue for years without collapsing sooner. Theranos surrounded itself with prestigious names on its board, aggressive secrecy internally, and a founder whose personal charisma and Silicon Valley mythology made skepticism feel almost impolite. Journalists, regulators, and employees who did raise concerns were dismissed, threatened, or ignored, right up until one investigation broke through the wall the company had spent years building. The real sunset clause on Theranos wasn't written the day the company was founded, and it wasn't written the day the Wall Street Journal published its investigation. It was written every single time an employee raised a concern internally and was told to stay quiet, every time a test result was quietly rerouted to a machine that wasn't supposed to be part of the story. The company didn't fail in 2015. It had already failed years earlier. It just hadn't been caught yet. If a company that never had a working product still managed to reach a $9 billion valuation, imagine what happens when a company has the winning product handed to them for $50 million and says no. That's Blockbuster, and that story is also here on Sunset Clause. And if you want to see how an entire industry giant collapsed by protecting a business model it should have already abandoned, watch how Kodak invented the digital camera and buried it to protect its own film sales.
Every agreement has its limit. This is the Sunset Clause.